Hello, Dr. Parker.
Hello.
Okay. We see you.
Pardon?
We're within minutes of starting.
Okay. Again, Lord.
Thank you, Pastor. First, giving honor to God for another opportunity to share information regarding mental health with his people. And a special thanks to you, Pastor Rawls, for this platform to engage in meaningful conversations on our mental wellness on each month. Good evening, everyone, and my name is Roxalina Rawls. I am absolutely delighted to have the author of The Mask-Wearing Journey of Sweet Papa Tea, Why African American Men Hide Their Feelings, Dr. Woodrow McLean Max Parker, with us this evening. Welcome, Dr. Parker. How are you?
I'm just fine. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. You're quite welcome. Dr. Parker and I first met, I recall, about 8 years ago. I was enrolled in the master's degree program at the University of Florida. And I can remember taking a multicultural class. And our professor at that time, Dr. Sarisi West Alachunji, walked into our classroom, and there were about 25 students. And she said to us on that particular morning, "Does anybody know who Dr. Woodrow Max Parker is?" And we looked at each other. We were puzzled. She said, "Well, if you don't know who he is, you need to get to know who he is." So I remember later on that day, I went home and got on my computer and I did some research because I wanted to know who this person was. And I was able to get some contact information. And the very next morning, I called his office and left a message. And he returned the call. I introduced myself and I told him what happened. And I told him that I would like to come by and interview him. And he was open to that. And from that point on, we had a professional relationship. He was my mentor throughout my degree program. I got to know his lovely, lovely wife, Sylvia, and we've maintained a friendship for those 8 years. So I thought I would invite him tonight to be part of our conversation. And I would like to share some information with you so maybe you will know some things about Dr. Parker. Woodrow McLean Max Parker is an American educator, mental health counselor, and author with a focus on multicultural counseling, training, and consultation. Prior to his retirement in 2016, he was a professor of counseling education and as a mental health counselor in the Counseling and Wellness Center at the University of Florida. He provided consultation services on diversity and race relations for schools, colleges, and a variety of community agencies, not only here in the state of Florida, but throughout the United States. Max Parker has authored several books, has also co-authored books, and has continued to contributed to several published works. So, without any further ado, let's get right down to our conversation with the author of this evening. Dr. Parker, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready as I can be.
Okay, all right. So we're going to start with some questions, and as we get to the end of our conversation, I'm going to open it up for individuals that may have some questions to ask. They may ask for Dr. Parker. So my first question, Dr. Parker, is where did the idea and the title for the mass wearing journey of sweet poverty, why African American men hide their feelings, where did that title come from? And how did you arrive at that? Where did the idea and the title come from?
First, Roxy, I'm going to call you Roxy. I really appreciate the invitation and the kind words. You put an awful lot of pressure on me because I don't know if I can live up to that introduction you just made. But thank you for the invitation anyway. And I've appreciated our friendship over the last 8 years or so. And I'm so happy that you're part of my life. Thank you very much. So let me begin here to try to answer the first question that you raised. How did we come about the title and the idea of the mass wearing journey of sweet poverty? First of all, I will a couple of bumps in the road because the mask wearing journey started really, the idea started during the time when the virus was in full swing. And when people saw the title, they thought we were talking about the mask that people wear made of cloth or made of plastic to prevent the spread of the virus. And so they said, my goodness, you can't, what kind of book is this going to be about? And later on, I need to say something about the origin too, because it came from actually from the first book that I wrote, which was a real educational sweet papa tea. In that book, a friend of mine read the first book and he read it carefully and he said, you know, Max, you did a great job and showed a lot of courage in writing that book in terms of how you met various events in your life with courage and commitment and conviction. But I couldn't help but notice that you wore many masks in that. And I didn't know exactly what he meant by saying I wore a mask. I thought he was saying that, you know, he's a good friend. So why would he say I'm being unreal, I'm being phony, I'm being a fake? But, you know, I kind of bought into his idea and said, because I pretended that it was okay. And just kind of said, well, you know, I just kind of wrote my experience as I lived them during the 1940s and the 1950s. But he said, well, I'm really talking about the mask that Paul Laurence Dunbar talked about in his poem, We Wear the Mask. He was talking about how slaves kind of had to wear masks to survive, to keep their families from being separated, and also just to survive from some of the negative consequences that could have resulted as a result of them not being appreciative of what the plantation owners and so forth were providing for them. And so, so I wrote the, let me say a little bit more about mask wearing as I understood
Please.
it. So I went back and took a look at the book myself, Roxy, and the book I had written, and my friend was absolutely correct because throughout the book, there were many signs of mask wearing. There were many, many signs of mask wearing. So let me say, first of all, how mask wearing was illustrated or demonstrated in that book. First of all, I found myself as I reread the first book, pretending that I was somebody that I was not. I didn't feel good about it. I disguised in many instances my real feelings about things. I agreed to do certain things to please other people. I gave consent by being quiet, being silent. Being silent is another form of mask wearing. I did not express my true ideas, my true thoughts, and my true feelings. I had many thoughts and feelings, and I played second fiddle, if you can believe it. I found myself playing second fiddle in my own band. And there may be I've met many other people who kind of do the same thing, and I recognize it because I could see those qualities in myself. I was, in some ways, kind of invisible and disrespected, like Ralph Ellison in 1952 did in his Invisible Man. I also find myself compromising quite a bit. And as the readers read the book, they will see where there was a great deal of compromising. Growing up in South Alabama, in 1940s and 1950s, many of us did compromise. We had dreams of leaving the farm and going north, leaving the farm, going, maybe some of us even dreamed of going to school, going to college. And so we continued that whole process of kind of compromising. And compromising is also a way of surviving. It's a way of wearing masks. Let's see, and we wore many masks, for different occasions to deal with different people. So mask wearing kind of persisted throughout my whole young life, and so did not feel good about that. At the end of the first book, I could really see Roxy, where my friend was absolutely correct. It was a way of life. It was how we cope with things. And so just wanted to kind of share that a little bit. And let's see, that might be one other thing that I did that I noticed as a mask wearing strategy or technique. I rarely stood tall and I rarely spoke in an assertive manner. I rarely spoke except in a controlled, mild way of speaking. I never said exactly what I meant and meant exactly what I said. And so that was a hurtful kind of thing. And I did that for so long, Roxy, until I found it to be a habit that was very, very difficult to break. And sometimes I find myself even now falling back into some of those habits. Most I guess, of people listening to this are familiar with Paul Laurence Dunbar's "We Wear the Mask." And somewhere I had written the first verse because I kind of have committed that in some ways to memory, so that I think about that from time to time. And it says, "We wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile. With torn and bleeding hearts we smile, and mouth with myriad subtleties." So mask wearing was a major part of the reason for writing the second book. And I want to go back, Roxy, and take a look at the first book and start from childhood through adulthood and see where I wore masks and how I can go about changing some of those mask wearing ways, instead of wearing masks, to try to have a process of dropping those masks.
Okay. I appreciate you carrying us through that process. And during your response, I think you may have touched upon the second question that I have. As an African American man growing up and working in the US of America, in the Deep South, why was mask wearing, and I use your words that you used in the book, why was it as natural as breathing to you? And those were the words that you used in your book. Why was it natural as breathing for you?
As early as I could remember, mask wearing was just a way of life. It was all around me. As far back as I can remember, people who survived and people who stayed out of Atmore prison and people who were able to have jobs and people who, again, survival seemed to be the key word, but people who acquiesced, people who bowed, who shuffled. And keep in mind now that we're talking about the 1940s and 1950s. Young people listening to this now probably have no idea what I'm talking about. But, and I may still be a certain amount of compromising, certain amount of masking. But masking was a way of life. It was just like it was in the air. It's pervasive. It was everywhere. And honestly, Roxy, that's all I knew. If I was going to be considered a good boy, I had to wear a mask. It was good to be a good boy with good manners, and not a mannish boy who was bad, because those guys ended up 5 miles north in Atmore Prison. And I didn't want to go to the Atmore Prison. So it was just part of, I think I wrote somewhere, and of course, in those days too, children were expected to just kind of be quiet, to be nice. And I will tell a brief story here about being nice. One day, I guess 8th or 9th grade, we were playing basketball outside. And without provocation, the boy hit me beside the head with a basketball. Teachers knew me to be a good boy. So I didn't want to go. I didn't want to fight and go back in class with my clothes all torn up and end up being considered a bad boy. So I took that lick beside the head with the basketball, and I've spent many, many years wondering why I didn't fight back. And I regret that I did not fight back. And I wondered over and over again. I tried to justify why I didn't fight back. And the only thing I could come up with was the fact that teachers would have judged me as not being a good boy. And being a good boy was important to me. So I didn't fight back. But in all honesty, I regret that I didn't do something other than take that basketball beside the head for no reason at all.
Dr. Parker, when you mentioned that, that leads me to my third question, and you had mentioned being a good boy. And in reading your book, some of the chapters brought me joy and others brought me pain. And there was one, and I don't want to give too much away about the book because I want individuals to get a copy of it and read for themselves. It's very interesting, a memoir of your life and how you handled that mask wearing. But how did you conceal your true thoughts and feelings in order to cope with personal and social challenges, especially growing up in the South? And some of the life-lived events you write about in your book are so traumatic and compelling. I just cannot imagine, as a little boy, African American boy, and young man coming of age, how were you able to suppress those emotions? And I just would like to share at the beginning of each chapter, you have some poetry with a little synopsis of what the chapter is about. And I would like to read this poem to the audience, the listening audience. And it reads, and let me just say this, I guess there was an oral agreement between you and a woman that you were going to perform some yard work. And there was an agreement that she was to pay you for the yard work over the summer. So I just wanted to read this, and it didn't turn out that way. The title is The Sinelli Bike on the Wall. He took a job raking leaves. For pay was promised a bike. After beautifying her precious yard, was told, go take a hike. Too tall, too old, too big, and surely too shame to cry. He tried his best to stop the flow of tears from his weeping eyes. He noticed Black men of that day, so humble, so sad, so chilling. No matter the problems they faced in life, didn't dare express their feelings. If he had prayed on that dreadful day to his Father God, bless his soul, his dreams of getting that Sinelli bike might have come true as he was told. Dr. Parker, when I read the chapter, it I cried. I cried. Maybe you did not cry, but here we're talking 65 years after that occurred. I cried for that little boy that was treated unfairly. So, could you talk a little bit about how did you what type of coping skills did you develop? How did you keep that suppress those feelings?
Well, thanks for bringing that up. When I revisited myself as a little boy, um, I was on my back porch that day when I recall what happened, and I didn't remember how painful it was until I revisited that time. And I too, as an 81 year old man, cried then. I cried again, and the tears still wouldn't stop coming down. And as I think about it, and even in this moment, Roxy, my heart feels heavy again, even now, as I try to continue to talk about it. How do we cope? It was a way of life. We knew it was just what we did. We didn't know any different. I didn't know any different. And boys in my age did not know. We just put it aside. We didn't have a right to be concerned about how we felt. That's just what we did. We knew no other way, no other problem. But it was just something we put aside and didn't know how painful and how what the psychological consequences were of being hurt or being mistreated. It was just the way of life. We did not know anything else. That's just the way it was. But what probably kept us going that we was not conscious of, I wasn't conscious of, was that I had an affirming mother and an affirming community and an affirming church and an affirming minister in the church who told us it was going to be all right, and they were absolutely correct. Affirming mother who was loving and such that she worked for $15 per week, and all 6 of her children graduated from high school, and all six attended college, and several of us graduated from college. $15 a week, and told us to love and not hate. And we believed her, and the same message was sent in church, to love. So, and I guess there were other ways, things that were happening that was so helpful. I guess I didn't know then, but if I knew then what I know now, I read something recently that Mary McLeod Bethune said. She was saying that we should not sell our souls for just a few nickels or a few dimes. We need to stand up for ourselves. And even recently, I was at your church when I heard they were saying something. I couldn't quite make it out because it said it so fast. So open your mouth and say something like that. Open your mouth and say something.
Excuse me.
And I said, that's it. That's the message. That's the message about, that's about dropping the mask. A young lady behind me, I said, what did she say? Open your mouth and say something. Open your mouth and say something. And that's kind of, you know, a message from people like John Lewis, just much later on, because John Lewis about my age. Open your mouth and say something. So, well, let's see if there's anything else I want to add here.
Wow, that's powerful. Open your mouth and say something. Um,
and of
Dr.
course,
Parker,
I'm
you
sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Dr. Parker, you indicated in your novel, you are the beneficiary of the history and an actor of disguise and concealment. Sometimes it's a matter of economic survival, sometimes it's a matter of life and death, and sometimes it's both. And I think you touched upon this in several of your comments. I'd like to know, what was the transition into an unmasking way of life, like to shape you into the successful African American man that you are today? What was that process like? Can you remember when that started? Do you, or it
Well,
just, how?
but actually, you know, Rock, that really wasn't a conscious thing. It just kind of happened. You know, I think the things that began to happen in the civil rights movement, I think definitely had an effect. But perhaps there might have been three interlocking constructs that I think, as I look back, kind of affected my life. One was about love, and I'll say a little bit about each. And the other one was about, I guess, resilience. And the other one had to do with kind of awareness of our racial, cultural identity. And I remember the words of, I've always liked James, James Baldwin. And James Baldwin said, you know, to his nephew, said, if it weren't for love, you know, we couldn't have survived. You know, we could not have survived if it weren't for love. And of course, resilience is all over the place. It was right there, but I didn't see it. How resilience has to do with being able to tackle a difficult situation, but bounce back, you know, get knocked down and get back up. And what greater illustration than the 1865 or 1863 or 65, whatever, 244 years of slavery that we were able to come back so strong, you know. No matter what you know, we're able to kind of bounce back. And but say a little bit more about love. Even Malcolm X, you know, having the reputation that he had, even talked about the importance of love. And he said, we have to change our minds about each other. To me, that's so powerful. We have to change our mind about each other. And we have to begin to look at one another with new eyes. We need to, especially as men, we need to begin to look at one another with new eyes. And we need to come together with love and compassion. And I thought about what happened with the young man in Memphis. They could not have seen one another, you know, with new eyes. You know, how could we do that to our own brother? And the other one is, again, with resiliency and this whole notion of I think we get messages from everywhere about resilience. We see African American women going to work and working so hard to kind of send us to school or to, you know, to take care of their families. We hear the voices of Maya Angelou, resilience. No matter what happened, we still rise. May write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust I rise. You know, we need to kind of carry those messages like that into then of course and then there's Maya Angelou who says that as we begin to think about racial cultural identity, she said that one of the reasons why there's so many young men that seem to be roaming the streets lost because we don't know our heroes and our sheroes. We don't know. There's no way we could behave that way if we knew about all of that rich history. And unfortunately, I was much too old when I began to, and I'm trying to catch up with my reading, and I don't think I'm gonna make it. But I'm trying my very, very best. There's so much I should have read years ago that would have made so much of a difference. If I had known about all this rich history and messages from not only people who are historical heroes, but people who grew up in my community, right there, who are living, witnesses to what can happen when you have faith and when you're a good person, you do what you're supposed to do. What greater, And then of course I go back to James Baldwin, and I haven't committed to memory, but I always go back and read this message from James Baldwin. As he talked to his nephew, he said, "It will be hard, James, but you come from sturdy peasant stock. Men who pick cotton in damn rivers and in the teeth of the most terrifying odds achieved an unassailable and monumental dignity. You come from a long line of great poets, some of the greatest since Homer. One of them said, the very time I thought I was lost, my dungeon shook and my chains fell off." And when I think about my chain, I think about dropping the mask, being real, being authentic, being more genuine, stop trying to control my voice so much and open my mouth. As the young lady at the church said, open your mouth and say something. Okay. Be aware of your thoughts, be aware of your mind and speak it, be aware of what's in your heart and say what you feel. And I recall when I'm gonna shut up in a second, but I recall one time I was working as a bartender in school, and these guys, it was a white place, of course, and these guys kept picking at me all night, and they said, "Boy, can't you see my glass is empty? Are you blind? Can't you see my glass is empty?" And I replied, and of course my chain fell off that night. My chain fell off. I dropped the mask, and I pointed to my name tag and said, "Call me by my name if you want me to bring you a drink. Call me by my name if you want me to bring you a drink." And again, I don't like to do this too often because it takes me back. It takes me back to that bar, and I put those feelings aside, Roxy. And I don't know when the burdens are going to go away, but I feel like crying sometime, even right now.
Do they call feeling your feelings? Is that what they call? Feeling your feeling? Identity. Well, I have one last question for you, and after the answer, then we'll open it up if our audience may have some questions. My last question for you is, what sage advice, wisdom, and encouragement could you share with African American males, whether they're boys, young men coming of age, or mature men, struggling to man up, or maybe unsuccessfully wearing the mask of the tough guy syndrome by trying to suppress their feelings and emotions of life traumatic events, past and present. What advice, Dr. Parker, can you provide?
Well, what an insightful question that is. I mean, that's tremendous. And of course, I have to drop the mask, pretend that I know the answer to that. I've always carried a verse by Edgar Guest who says, I have to live with myself, and so I want to be fit for myself to know, and I want to be able, as the days go by, always look myself straight in the eye. And of course, the young Michael Jackson talks about, about the man in the mirror, the person in the mirror, and I think there's a great message in that. But also, again, I go back to Du Bois, and he talks about also, knowing our fellow man too. And he says, and I'll read it, herein lies the tragedy of the age. Herein lies the tragedy of the age. Not that men are poor. All men know something of poverty. Not that men are wicked. Who is good? Not that men are ignorant. What is truth? Nay, but that men know so little of men. Now, if those guys in Memphis had known that guy, really known his soul, known that this guy in his body carries the Spirit of God, they couldn't have done that to him. They could not have done that to him if they really knew him. So we need to know our fellow man. And so I think another thing I've just come up with 2 or 3 other little tidbits, that I'd like to just kind of mention.
Yes.
And I'll mention those. I think we need to be willing to compromise to better our lives, to make our dreams come true. We need compromising. There's nothing wrong with mask wearing. Compromising is a form of mask wearing. I don't want you to go away thinking that mask wearing is bad, because we all wear them from time to time. And the second one is that we need to be aware that we need different faces to navigate our way in different settings and different occasions. We need to wear different faces. So when you hear people talking about folks being 2 faces, that's not all that bad. It's not all necessarily negative. And I also like to say, number 3, that there's a thin line between mask wearing and lying. There's a thin line between mask wearing and lying. Lying is to have an unfair advantage over another, over another, and which is different from lying to meet the basic human survival needs. There's a difference between lying and mask wearing. Mask wearing was used to help us survive. And when the intent is noble and the intent is given with the blessing of God, go on and wear the mask. Number 4, we need to change our thinking from negative to positive about one another. 5, make responsibility a center of our lives. Make responsibility become much more responsibility centered. Number 6, and I think I've said this already, know yourself, your strengths, weaknesses, thoughts, feelings, and express those. Above all, love one another, which is a basic Christian belief. Love one another. And finally, I carry this and I think about it. And I thought about this a long time. I used to hear an English teacher say this back in Middleton High School in Tampa. And she say to her students from time to time, honor and fame from no condition rise. Act well your part. They're all honor lies. This old man, even today, whatever I do, at the end of the day, I ask myself, old man, have you done the best that you could do? Have you done all the good you can? Have you acted well your part? Thank you, Roxanne.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. Now, I would just, for the last few remaining moments that we have, I would just like to open it up for if anyone has any questions, or Pastor, if anyone has any questions in the chat. Any questions?
Sorry about that. My microphone had switched over, but I don't see any in the chat yet. But I just share appreciation to those that came before us, that had to do certain things, in order for us to be where we are now. And I think it's in us appreciating each person in the time and the moments that they moved and maneuvered. I think when we gain that type of appreciation, I think we can have those Sankofa moments to where we can kind of look back in order to go forward. And so I look back with appreciation and not despising. Look back with appreciation for those that did, so I don't have to do today, and so that I could learn. There's a saying said, to thine own self, be true. And I think as we maneuver our way through this world that's not always the most friendly place, to people of African descent, I think that people have paved the way so that each generation can be can feel comfortable, um, when taking mask off. And so there are times when there are things that we might do certain things for, but we should at all times feel if I need to take this mask off, there's a comfort level in removing this mask. I've learned from the past, and so I appreciate Dr. Parker, and I have much respect for those that came before me. I remember sitting talking with Sister Alexander, and Sister Alexander, she'll be 99 in May.
Oh, wow.
But I was sitting
God
over
bless
and speaking with her, and she was just sharing, that when she was talking about her dad. So if she's about to be 99, just imagine, her dad. And she was saying that one thing that her dad, that she when she watched her dad walk through town, that it was understood that that you didn't look white people in the eyes, and
Right.
that's what he had to do, to survive and be able to make it home to his family,
Absolutely.
and so people of my generation, that might come from a totally different stand, we have to understand that if it had not been for him, I could not take the stance that I take today. But now I need to take that stance,
Right.
with responsibility, and I need to be able to make sure that the generation that comes behind me is able to go farther than I did. And so I think it all works together, and we have
Absolutely.
we have to be appreciative of where the others had to maneuver through this world that we live in.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Beautiful.
Any other comments or questions for Dr. Parker?
Well, I mean, I'll hog up everything. We
Go right ahead, Pastor.
When Dr. Parker was talking, it reminded me of the sermon yesterday when we were talking about the power has been restored, and the whole idea of restoring our dignity. For so many years, our dignity was stripped from us.
Absolutely.
We were unbiblically taken away from our country and put into slavery. There was nothing biblical about the slavery that we suffered. That we didn't know anybody anything. It wasn't indentured servitude or debt that we created. It was people twisting the scriptures, but in all of it to endure, and what we should not fall prey to. In order to restore, we can't depend on anybody else to restore our dignity. It's up to us to make sure that we pass the stories down. The oral history, the written history, whatever, that we pass that down so that those coming behind us know who we are, and we have to restore our own dignity. It does not benefit others, people who benefited off of
Absolutely.
our oppression. It does not benefit them for us to know how strong we are, for us to know all of our capabilities, for us to know all of our abilities. It does not, so they'll never, if we're expecting them to push our history in schools and things like that, they'll never
Right.
do it because it does not benefit them. We
Absolutely.
have to own this right here, and we have to restore the dignity of how we treat one another. And so, what made me think about that, he said that Malcolm X said we have to change our minds about one another, and we have to we have to have some mercy and some grace
Absolutely.
with one another. We expect one another to operate, at a 10 at all times, but we allow others to operate at a 3 in customer service and how they deal with us, because it's how we view self. And so the more we begin to view self better, and we begin to respect our dignity and restore our dignity, we will allow our businesses to make a mistake sometime. We will allow ourselves to make a mistake sometime without canceling ourselves without writing ourselves out, because we don't do others like that. And so I like that quote by Malcolm X: is we have to change our minds about how we view one another, because
Absolutely.
it was tried. It was intentional to make us have low self, a low view of self as it relates to one
Absolutely.
another.
Mm-hmm.
I,
Absolutely.
I regret not having heard that sermon. I wish I had known it was. I regret missing it. That would absolutely.
You can
Well,
still see.
if Roxy gives me your email address, I'll email it to you, Dr. Parker.
Okay. I'll
I'll be
give it to
glad
her.
to.
I would
I'll be
love to hear that.
I'll be glad to. Are there
Absolutely.
any are there any other comments or questions? If not, I would encourage individuals to, and I'll hold up a copy of the book, The Mask Wearing Journey of Sweet Papa Tea, Why African American Men Hide Their Feelings. If you would like to purchase your own copy or for a family member or friend, the book can be purchased on Amazon. And Dr. Parker, understand that you have a few copies on hand if someone would like to get it. Dr. Parker, would you be willing to autograph those if
That
someone?
would be my pleasure.
Okay,
Absolutely.
okay.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, as I said, I have my own personal copy. I would like to purchase two more, one for
Okay.
a family member that's struggling with unmasking. And the other one, I would like to do something a little bit creative. I would like to take and put that other copy, donate it to our local library. I would like to put that in circulation so other individuals will have an opportunity to take and read this book. It's
Sounds
powerful,
great.
this book, and it's a book that you read and reread again, because every time I read it, there's something else that comes out that touches me. You cannot be
Wonderful.
untouched by reading this book. So, with that being said, Dr. Parker, would you like to leave us with some parting words?
Well, the words that the pastor presented just a few minutes ago, I don't know. I mean, enough said. I really, really appreciate his comments, and I think we only need to take those as directives, and embrace those, and live by those. Every day do the very best we can in every aspect of our lives. And so the table has already been set and the directive has already been given. So let's follow those.
Well, I just would
Thank you so much.
I would thank you for coming, taking time out of your busy schedule and being a part of the conversation this evening. And Pastor, would you like to close us out?
Um, yep, I think everything was wonderful. Make sure you go ahead and share that post. I want to thank Dr. Parker so much for coming and share with us, and I'm sure we're going to have you back in another way to just share with our community. But make sure you share this on your social media posts so that others might have an opportunity to hear this conversation. Thank you so much. God bless you and have a great one.
Same to you. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.